Hello and welcome to Data Driven, the podcast where we explore the emerging field of data science. We bring the best minds in data, software engineering, machine learning and artificial intelligence. Now here are your hosts, Frank Lavinia and Andy Leonard.
Hello and welcome back to Data Driven, the podcast where we explore the emerging fields of data science, machine learning, and artificial intelligence. If you like to think of data as the new oil, then you can think of us as Car Talk. With me, as always, on this epic road trip down the information superhighway is Andy Leonard. How you doing, Andy?
I'm doing well, Frank. How are you?
Doing fantastic. We're recording this on May 17th. And we actually just hung out the other day at a Databricks training event up in Chevy Chase, Maryland.
That was pretty awesome. It was great to hang out with you. It was very interesting to see where Databricks is in their life cycle. They're still growing, which I find encouraging. And for those who don't know, Azure Databricks went live recently. I want to say within the last month or so.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah.
Before the Build conference, actually, which was surprising. I thought that would be the big bang moment, but I guess it was just too important to wait. It's actually a pretty cool product. I think we're going to be talking more about it in the not too distant future, and I think you're going to hear a lot more about Databricks and kind of Spark in general. It's really exciting though to see kind of the open source ecosystem of big data tools still being very vibrant and competitive. I know Cloudera has a pretty cool offering. I know I was just on a call the other day about Confluent, which is kind of a commercial version of Apache Kafka or Kafka.
Yeah.
That was pretty cool. And it's a lot of good stuff going on. But speaking of good stuff, we have a special announcement. And I'll let Andy share the good news about what makes this episode so special. But first, I'm going to play some music.
Should I voice over the music?
Yeah, sure.
Okay. So our big announcement, the reason we're recording this particular show, it's about a week early, is Data Driven is 1 year old.
Can you imagine?
I tell you, Frank, I'm happy. I was pretty sure we'd make it to a year. I did not have any idea we'd get to the number of downloads that we've experienced so far, even at the time of this recording. I was over there, and I'll let you share with everyone the milestone that we hit.
So recently, I think it was actually on Mother's Day, we hit 50,000 downloads.
Woohoo!
Which is, roughly about 11 and a half months, which is pretty cool. So we can kind of say our annual run rate, if you will, is 50,000 downloads. Now, obviously, maybe year two we'll better ourselves. I know we'll try. But I mean, if you go back and you listen to the data point, I think it was the first data point we recorded in person together.
Yep.
Which was a milestone right there.
Right.
It was interesting. I was listening to it though, and there was a lot of wind noise. So if you missed kind of some of the particulars, we'll rehash the important stuff and probably sidetrack onto something else. I was going to say we're not going to sidetrack, but that honestly, in a year and like 127-ish shows, that's not really happened.
Yeah. I'm impressed with that number, though, Frank. That's a lot of shows. I mean, you figure there's 365 days in a year, and I'm just doing the math in my head here real quick, but that's close to a show every 3 days.
Let's see. I happen to have a computer in front of me.
Do you?
I do. 365 divided by, well, this will be one. Right now, there's 127 posted, so including this one will be 128. And it's a power of 2, right? So it's good luck. Every 2.85 days.
Wow.
Which is impressive, actually. And I don't think we set out to do that. I think what's interesting is how the show has kind of evolved.
Yeah.
and taken on its own taken on its own life, if you will. I mean, and I think that's what I wanted, because I started this podcasting idea journey probably Thanksgiving of 2016.
Yeah, yeah.
And that was when the dust was settling from a lot of bad things in my personal life.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, I'm just going to forget 2016, write it off as an awful year. And just kind of like, prepare for 2017. And, so I decided, I wanted to do a podcast. I wanted to do it for a while. I've been listening to a number of them again. And I was listening to John Lee Dumas, who runs the podcast Entrepreneur on Fire. And for like 5 years, he did a show every day.
Yeah.
In his show format. And he actually has a podcasting course and stuff like that, which is actually really good. That's how I became obsessed with learning and training in 2016, 2017. And I took the class and kind of figured out, well, podcasting is kind of an evolved form. So it's not like when I had my little known fact here, Andy, I actually had a podcast called Frankie's Friday Flashback. 2005 time frame, which lasted all of 3 or 4 shows.
Yeah, yeah. But you were doing some other stuff. You were doing shows on that were I saw them on YouTube.
Right, I did a lot of shows on YouTube, and there's a lot of funny stories around kind of the production about how that started and kind of like how that changed and how that evolved over time.
Right.
So yeah, I mean, I hadn't obviously, if you've been checking out my blog, I mean, I've been blogging since 2004 pretty regularly. Unfortunately, there's no more proof of that because of what ClearDB did, but
there's that. Yeah.
There is that.
Which was one of our 128 shows this past year. We had
that was we had a special kind of we did a special announcement show with sad music and stuff like that.
That was a traumatic event. And when we recorded that, it was still relatively raw, although since Frank and I are friends, I know that you had calmed down quite a bit by the time we did the show.
Right. I didn't want, we wanted to keep our family friendly rating on iTunes.
We did.
I did need about, 24 hours for that to kind of cool off.
That was a big deal. And I get it. I mean, that was up north of a decade of blog posts that just went away.
13 years.
Yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So obviously I was, none too happy about that. But I don't want to sidetrack this happy moment into
No. But yeah, we had that. Some other really cool things while we're talking about past shows. We have to do some shout outs. Jen Underwood was our very first victim. Guest.
Yeah.
And it was a fun show. We actually recorded that show in February of 2017.
Right.
Frank and I did a little bit of backstory before that show. We were back and forth. We were trying technology, and we're still doing this. We're still trying tech to make the domain datadriven.tv, more about the TV part of that. We love doing the audio podcast, and we realize that a lot of people are only ever going to listen to the podcast, the audio version, and that's fine. But we definitely wanted to do a show, and we still do. We were actually talking about it. We were hanging out the other day. But we had gone back and forth, and we've mentioned some people on the show before. Frank just mentioned John Lee Dumas. We've mentioned Grant Cardone and people who are success coaches and folks that have inspired us. And I forget, was it Be Obsessed or Be Average we were listening to at the end of 2016? Right. And
right.
Frank was like,
I think it was the 10X rule first.
Okay, maybe it was. And Frank was like, we just need to do this.
Right. So, I think it was actually what you said. I was like, because originally we were going to be a video podcast.
Yeah.
And which is why first off, datadriven.com was already taken.
That's
it's some kind of crime data analytics software.
Right.
And then we then was like, well, .tv is available. I was like, you know what? That's awesome. Because, I had the background of producing the Frank's World TV shows, the DC Tech Minute, and a few other kind of things that I had produced while I was employed at Microsoft. And the first time I was employed at Microsoft. And then basically it was kind of like, it was pretty clear we were not going to launch. I think our original target was launching in February-ish.
Yeah, we were talking about that. Yes,
right. And I'm sharing. I'm opening the kimono, as they say, which is a disturbing image. Anyway, to kind of if you're on the fence about creating a podcast, I mean, you can do it.
absolutely.
And if you want help, I mean, reach out to us. We've been there. We've done that. We have a T-shirt, mouse pad, and possibly a laptop sticker. I don't know, but. No, so we were kind of like, we were trying it, and then I was also trying to get the data science certifications, and it just quickly became like, it was pretty clear we were like mid-February, and we were stuck in the mud because there's some particulars about recording like interview type stuff remotely that we were running into, and kind of what we had envisioned, shall we say, because it's not that hard to do with Skype and stuff like that, but I wanted to do something kind of crazier with a virtual studio and, amped up special effects. And it was pretty clear that was not going to happen. I was trying to go for like the Twit TV type style where, I sit at a desk, Andy's at a desk, and we all bring in guests on a picture in picture and stuff like that. And in the process, I was trying to build a what I call the poor man's TriCaster. Mm-hmm. Which, if you're not familiar, TriCaster is kind of like this broadcast studio deck type thing that I had access to when I was at Microsoft the first time, and it's like a $10,000 investment. And obviously, we didn't want to do that for a podcast right away. So we just like, you know what, screw it, we got to do this. Let's just do it as an audio podcast, and we'll explore video in the future.
Yep, and that's what we did, and I think it was a great call.
I think so too, because I think one of the things I realized from talking to other podcasters and stuff like that is that podcasting has been around since the iPod came out. Right, it's not a new technology per se,
right?
But it's really in the middle of a renaissance now, because I think people are realizing that multitasking. You can wash dishes while you're listening to a podcast. You can cook supper.
Right. You
can drive, and I think audio only content, which had kind of been sidelined by TV since, I don't know, maybe the 50s or 60s, mm-hmm. Is come back. I mean, you look at the success of audiobook platforms.
Oh yeah.
It's just, and kind of my personal listening habits. I mean, there's only so much, top 40 or, FM radio or AM radio you can listen to, because it's all, I don't want to say it's garbage, but it's repetitive.
I like repetitive. That's nicer.
That is much nicer. Well, especially if you, I know you live kind of far out, so you probably do a lot of driving to go into town or whatever. Yep. I live in DC, so my commute could range from 30 minutes to 4 hours.
Yeah.
So there's only so much you can listen to of music. So what I like about it is, like, I can kind of learn stuff, and we kind of thought about, well, who are the successful models of this and things like that. So I did a lot of studying of that, and again, I'm kind of going on a sidetrack, but
that's all good.
I'm not going on a sidetrack. I'm going deep. That's what it is.
Deep. That's right.
But one of the things that was interesting was, if you listen to Entrepreneur on Fire, he kind of has a format where he kind of interviews the guest for the first half of the show, and then he comes up with kind of set questions he would ask towards the end of the show. And I really like that format. I mean, there's obviously kind of the .NET Rocks format where it's just a pure interview and kind of see where it goes. They have, I like that format. There's a lot of podcasts that do that, but I really liked his format where it was kind of free form in the front, and then on the back end, it was kind of like, set questions.
Right.
Because one of the things I've noticed is that guests are not necessarily comfortable speaking on, well, certainly they're not comfortable speaking on camera as much as they are on audio.
That's true.
And even then they're like, well, are you trying to trick me with these questions? I'm not going to say who it was, but we had a guest or two that kind of said that. I was like, no, we're not doing like the morally safer thing where we're like catching you, with
Right.
Mike Wallace.
Right.
This is just literally us like, chewing the fat, about data.
Right. Right. Yep. So it was, and to be fair, that guest had legitimate concerns, and we get it.
Oh yeah.
But yes, we weren't trying to trick anybody. We had some pretty potent conversations. And I'm sure we'll have some more. We especially, I would say, in some of the shows and the data points that we did when we were talking with females in the industry. Um, Quite often there was a sidebar in there about how women are treated in our industry, and I found that was not only interesting with what was going on in the past year, 2017, 2018, just in general in our culture. We saw reflections of that, basically some of that poor behavior in our community. And I think it's important. I think it's, we're talking about data science, we talk about statistics, we talk about information that's gathered on people, um, and, and how that works. And this was kind of sharing that, yep, this happens even in the data community, even in data science, in AI and machine learning. And I'll just admit, it was a little heartbreaking for me as a dad of three daughters and a granddad of three granddaughters that, let me check my watch. Yeah, it's 2018 and this crap is still going on. So we did
But I
have
also
some.
think that, I'm sorry.
Go ahead. No, go.
I also think shedding light on it. I think I'm a big believer in transparency.
Sure. Sure.
And one thing I noticed growing up in, New York City is that, when you turn the lights on, the cockroaches scatter.
Yeah. Well, that happens in Farmville too.
Oh, okay. I wasn't sure. But I mean, bad stuff tends to happen in shadows.
Yeah, true. Very
And
true.
I think, obviously there's a time and a place for privacy, but these types of shenanigans, I mean, it should not go on.
Agree.
I mean, one, it's just the right thing to do. And two, I mean, let's keep it professional.
Yeah. Yeah.
Just be nice. I mean, like, if nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah. It just, Frank, we've had this discussion. There's some things that, you're just not susceptible to. I'm not susceptible to. I will agree with C.S. Lewis here when he talked about this in the same context. And gambling is just one that doesn't impact me. In fact, I think I don't know if I mentioned this on the show, but a couple years ago, I was at a conference in Las Vegas, and I've been to Las Vegas a few times to attend or present at conferences. And I was at the IT Dev Connections conference, and Christy went with me, and I um, I actually gambled. I spent $60, Frank, $60 at the blackjack
Wow.
table. I am so bad at blackjack. It took about 12 minutes to lose $60, and the dealer felt so bad he was helping me. Um, Christy's actually, she's good with like, you would think between us, right? I would be the one who's better with things like statistics and cards and stuff. No, she's the poker player in the house, but I can't let go of that money. I mean, I walked up to a slot machine and could not let go of the coin. Okay, I just could not do it. It's just like it. So for me, I don't suffer from certain things. And you're the same way. You don't suffer from certain. We're just not drawn to things like that. And while I know for a fact I have not been Andy the perfect gentleman my entire life, that has not happened. And I can give you examples when I have not. And, but I will say that I was raised to treat women a certain way. I got my butt kicked in the third grade by a girl because you could not hit her back. My only defense was to curl up in a ball and wait till she got tired of kicking me and stomping, and because that was not an option, and so again, I'm not Saint Andy from Farmville, but um, it bothers me. Because of the way I was raised, it bothers me to see this behavior, and I imagine that some of my behavior bothers others. So that said, I see, I see it's a good thing. Like you said, turn on the lights is a good thing. Raising the awareness, um, being there for people who find themselves in that situation. Right? If I see it now, it's not that I go around looking for it, but I'm more aware that it's going on now than I used to be, especially at conferences and stuff where people may be enjoying themselves a little more than they should. The defenses get down and maybe they get a little handsy. Um,
Right.
I'm more aware that that happens now than I was before. And here's the thing: I would not have been aware, and part of the reason why I would not have been aware is because I didn't know it was going on. I was naive. I did not know, but now I do. So I
But you don't
watched.
know what you don't know. I mean, you
Well,
can't.
that was it, and and I'm very thankful for the women that came on the show and talked about this. I'm grateful for women in the data science, AI, data engineering, machine learning communities that have both blogged and posted on social media about this. I'm thankful because, as I said, I was one of those people who was ignorant. And I don't say that with any pride. Um, I say it to my shame, but it that's how I was. And now I'm different thanks to the awareness.
There you go.
So we also had, and here's what I like. I was going to say we also had. Here's the thing: when we go looking for guests, we don't have any kind of checklist in mind. Other than it's like, okay, there is a. It's like people ask, how do you get to be on a data driven podcast? Somebody asked me that the other day, and I was like, you email, you know, ask because we don't go looking for anything other than just somebody who's doing interesting work and who will talk with us. I mean, that's it.
And who will respond to our requests? That.
Yes, and we have hit, we have thrown some pretty big shots out there. I'll say this one because I want this, Frank. I don't know when it's going to happen, but one of my heroes is Nassim Nicholas Taleb, and I want Mr. Taleb to be on our show. I hope NN Taleb, NNTALEB on Twitter. I want him to be on our show. I've been reading his books for years now: Anti-Fragile, The Black Swan, Fooled by Randomness, and the latest one, Skin in the Game. Great books, great audio books, by the way. And I can toss it over to Frank, who can do this plug. We have this thing with audiobooks at Audible.
So one of our first sponsors has been actually Audible, who hooked up our listeners with if you go to thedatadrivenbook.com, you'll be taken to their site. If you sign up, you'll get a free book and one free audiobook, and you can kind of check out the program. And I've noticed that audiobooks are very addictive. In fact, if you look at what's really cool about the audiobooks app, even the Windows 10 app does this too.
Yeah.
It shows you stats. It shows you statistics of how many minutes you've listened to over time, over the day, by week, by all time. So yeah, so if you go to that website, they'll hook you up with a free book. You get a month free, which I don't know what that means exactly, but I guess you can peruse the catalog and see if you're interested in it. I really appreciate how the application, even the Windows Phone app, not Windows Phone, the Windows 10 app does this, where it'll show you kind of statistics, and you get badges. So if you listen to a book, if you fall asleep overnight listening to an audiobook, it'll give you the Night Owl badge. It's pretty cool. It's kind of like a little bit of gamification of audiobooks.
Cool.
I'm a big fan of their service, and I know
Okay.
you are too.
Yep. Yeah. So huge fans of that. But I wanted to, I was saying that we don't really, we don't really go look for anything other than people doing cool stuff in the field. And I think, we've expanded, probably the most things we've changed. Gosh, what we've done differently if anything, is that we've talked more about data engineering, and that's just because that's what I do. So that's my fault.
Right.
But
So no, I don't think it's your fault. So the backstory to this, and I guess if you're not interested in kind of the it's not like the prequels where it's boring. I think it's kind of like an origin story, like
yeah,
Batman.
exactly.
Was like, I was thinking about, I want to do a podcast,
Right.
right? And I wasn't quite sure what it was, and I kind of thought, the brand, so to speak, of Frank's World. It's a cool brand. It's been around since, I think I registered a domain name in '96. So it's a kind of an old brand, but it's not really specific. It doesn't really, like, what's Frank's World? Like, I don't get it.
Well,
And I realized, well, it can't be a branded Frank's World podcast because that would just make no sense, because it's kind of doesn't immediately jump out at you. And
I wouldn't say that, but I hear what you're saying.
well, you know me, you know the site. That doesn't apply to you, but
Okay, yeah,
unfortunately, there's about 7 or 8 billion people that do not. So I'm marketing towards them. So I kind of was like, well, I'm studying data science. I'm leaving the world of, desktop client, smart client development, UWP stuff behind. I'm moving into data science. How cool would it be to do a podcast on that? And I was like, yeah, that's what I want to do. And I think I actually recorded a data point about that. Like,
You did.
it was probably Black Friday. The dust in my life was just settling. I had just gotten over a concussion, which was kind of like the final, like, literally the kick in the head.
Yeah.
If you will, of just the insult, adding insult to injury, or injury to insult. And I was at Dunkin' Donuts, actually, and the door handles each had a D on it.
I remember that.
And I was like, it'd be cool, right? So data starts with a D. What if I can come up with another word, like, data dudes? I didn't like that.
Yeah.
And I was like, what about? I had this kind of epiphany. I was like, well, as I sipped the coffee, I'm like, I got to come up with a podcast about kind of like, this that talk about this data-driven world we're living in. And I'm like, oh, that's it. I kept, because I didn't have a pen with me. I didn't think to use the voice recorder app. Again, just recovered from a concussion, so I just kept repeating data-driven in my head. And that's how the show name came about.
That is so cool.
And I actually had a recorded data point. I forget what we were celebrating. It was one of those milestones of, like, we hit a certain milestone that, and I was like, I took my kids to Dunkin' Donuts, and I was like, all right, to the same one. And I was like, okay, guys, I'm gonna record something real quick, then we'll get donuts.
I remember this. The Facebook is so much better, by the way.
Yeah. So I'll get to what data points are. If you're subscribed to the show, you probably know what they are, and I'll kind of talk about how they started, because that's actually a cool story too.
It is.
So if you're not already subscribed to the Facebook page, you totally should, because you get, like, the raw stuff and the stuff that just doesn't make it to the podcast feed.
Yes.
Like, and it's just funny. Like, this one's particularly hilarious, where imagine, I think he was 7 at the time, a 7-year-old and a 2-year-old being promised that they were given donuts, but daddy had to record something real quick.
Right. Just a minute.
Just a minute. So imagine that. If you're a parent, you know exactly the humor that ensues. If you're not a parent, you have to watch the original, because it's just flipping hilarious.
It is awesome. It's very
awesome.
1
minute. Just give me 1 minute, guys. They were like, where are the donuts?
But the data points were a great idea. And these are little mini shows that we had. And they're Frank. I'll just say that, not because I don't like doing data points. I do. It's just Frank has like 1 million ideas a day. I have 2. But
I like to say I've weaponized my ADD.
I want to say they're, anywhere from probably about 1.5 minutes, 2 minutes up to that. I mean, they go like the one we just did I know it's greater than 10 because we tried to post it on LinkedIn video and learned there's a 10-minute limit.
Right.
So there's that. But the idea is to just drop a little stuff, into the pipe, and I'm not going to announce it yet, Frank, but because and our users can hear me typing in the background because I've got a really good mic. Um, so what am I doing? And I'm actually sending Frank links to new pages on Data Driven because they're
okay.
required to do something related to a problem Frank was having a minute ago. That's almost giving it away. But yeah, we're working on even more stuff like data points. Frank started with data science dailies, which were awesome.
Mm-hmm.
They were hard to do because it's hard to find something new every single day. It's not that there isn't new stuff coming out every single day. It's just a lot of work. You wouldn't believe how much work Frank was putting into this just to find the stuff. It was doing the recording and stuff. I'll say this, and maybe one day we'll talk about it. But Frank is a developer, and he's actually created some automation that like pulls a whole bunch of this stuff apart and posts it for us. So there's a lot of podcasters out there working really, really hard to produce their material and to send it to all of these multiple platforms. And Frank just picks up a URL, drops it in the box, hits go. And the stuff he wrote over a year ago, it's just magic. It's just bam, 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 bam. It goes here, here, and there. So we've kind of got, I don't know. Have we done like a data science automation kind of thing? Can we consider things like the Facebook Live videos to be?
I would call that DevOps, but for content.
Well, that's a great description for it, but we need to talk about that some other time because we'll talk about that for hours.
Totally. Yeah.
It's so cool, but it makes this way easy. But the data science dailies were consuming time just sifting through stuff.
So actually, the number one reason I stopped doing the data point dailies, or the data science dailies, was I felt that I was contributing to the noise.
Oh, okay.
I mean, I again, because it takes time, I can automate a lot of that away because a lot of it's the same kind of a thing. In terms of content ingestion, that was one thing. So the main reason I stopped doing it was kind of I kind of had why am I doing this? And am I helping? Right. And I didn't think I was helping because there's just like drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah.
And kind of I thought back to our show's original mission statement, which I don't think we've ever publicly said. Well, we publicly said when we talked. I don't think we mentioned it on the show.
Yeah.
It just never happened because we get sidetracked so easily.
Yeah.
But no, it was to help people transition from kind of being a data engineer or a developer into what is coming. The data wave that's coming and transition into a more data-driven business economy or job market.
Right.
And that's kind of what, which is why, Andy and I have known each other for a while, but this is really the first project we worked on together.
True. Like this. I mean, we worked together, 13
Right,
years
you're right. The
community.
Right. That's true. But I meant an actual tangible product.
That's true. Yeah.
Yes. But I would say that when I thought about doing a podcast, I was like, I don't want to do this by myself because it's just me prattling on, right?
Yeah.
And that's Frank's World TV kind of in a nutshell, right? No, it's not that bad. But I also realized as a software engineer, I had not as much street cred in terms of being a data scientist yet. This is a while ago now. I mean, we're looking at from ideation. This was 18 months ago.
Right.
I think I had passed one certification.
Well, yeah. And
whereas now I'm at like 25, 30, but
yeah, I was
but anyway, so I mean it was kind of like I need somebody that, is good at explaining stuff, would be passionate about kind of the vision and mission that I had, and knew his stuff inside and out. And I was like, first person to pop in my mind was Andy.
Well, I was going to say, when you described, by the way, thank you, Frank. And I'm touched when we started talking about this. I was really, really excited. Right. I don't think you finished the sentence, and I was like, I'm in.
Right.
When you were describing sharing that description just now, I was like, and all of those people were busy. And so you asked me.
No. You were the first. You were the first name, and you said yes, which boded very well for the project.
It was a great idea. I remember when we talked about it, and this kind of goes back to some of the success people we were talking about, like JLD and Grant Cardone and stuff earlier. Is they talk an awful lot about just getting things done, and it's amazing how. And Frank, you were really going through the ringer there, and you just did a pivot. You took off. You put your head down. You put your nose to the grindstone, and you just bowled through this. I mean, I'm still impressed. And I was going to pick on you about your certifications because I was going to tell you, it's been like, I don't know, 3-4 days. And you haven't finished the class. Like,
dude, it's been 8 days. Can you imagine?
8 days. Crazy. What is wrong? But I know you've been busy because we had a whole day where we spent up there in Chevy Chase learning more about Databricks. That was fun. So that will give you, that day comes off the 8th.
Give me a pass. Yeah.
But still, 7 days, Frank. But Frank really did this, and he literally threw himself into this. He's Frank's got a family, a lovely wife, and other things that keep him busy outside of all of this. And yet, and still, you put your head down. You said, "I'm going to do this," and you just did it. So I've been totally inspired by that. In fact, you called me before that and got me to listen to the 10X Rule by Grant Cardone.
Right.
And it just really inspired me. And one of the nice things about my and Frank's friendship is that, well, I can speak for me. I'll say that I am constantly inspired by Frank. I'm motivated. I'm lifted up. And it's not this mutual admiration society where Frank's, I am in me and telling me, "Hey, Andy, you're awesome." It's, "Hey, check out this podcast, man. Listen to this. See what these people are doing." And, we throw ideas back and forth about data-driven. I would say, Frank, we probably executed maybe 20% of what we've talked about so far.
Right.
It's not because we're slackers. It's we have a lot of great ideas.
Right. But, honestly, one of the things that I've read in various, self-improvement books and things like that, because I was at a point in my life in 2016 where it was like a lot of bad, ungood things happening.
Yes.
And, I was like, one of two things is going to happen. It's going to make me or break me, or it's going to make me. So I basically set out kind of when everything hit a crescendo, kind of the summer of 2016. I was like,
yeah,
whatever happens, I'm going to use this and try to make myself a better person.
Yep.
Regardless of what happens. And that's when I really committed to, listening to these books and, we live in an exciting time. And I don't think people really fully appreciate that if you wanted to learn how to perform brain surgery, you can find free content, YouTube videos.
I know.
Would people let you operate on them? Probably not. But but I mean, the point is,
a good thing mostly. But yeah,
I would think that would be a good thing. But I mean, we live in a time when knowledge is so shareable and freely available in formats that I think are really going to, over the long term, really change how we think of education. That we'll look back at kind of how we do things today as kind of quaint. You're starting to see this now with the massive, MOOCs, the online courses. You kind of see this, but you also see people that build, personal brands around teaching you how to. All the video stuff I learned was from a YouTube channel called Film Riot.
Right.
Another one called Mike Diva, which is his stuff's pretty trippy, but like they kind of show you like, this is the video I made and this is how I did it. And I mean, it's just, that's the world we live in now. And you have that opportunity to do that. And kind of my dream for data driven would be to kind of be that, but for data science.
Right.
And I think we've executed on that pretty well. But the key difference between those who think about ideas and have ideas and actually do them, I mean, there's that execution path. Right. Ideas are cheap, but execution is expensive.
Agreed.
And I mean, just you say that, we've only executed on 20% of our ideas, but that's 19% more than most people.
Agreed. No, that wasn't a smack at us. It was more of
Right.
a, my gosh, we have so many ideas, and that's Frank's working on a couple right now. I'm the clicking and typing you hear in the background of this show is me working on another. But it's just we've been motivated by folks. Another book we need to do a shout out to, and it's an excellent, excellent audio book, is Gary Vaynerchuk's Crushing It.
Right.
As a sequel to Crush It, which is about 8 years old at the time of this recording. It's a little dated in some of the links and platforms he talks about on social media. Some of them I'd never heard of. Some of them have just gone away. But the update to the content, especially the last maybe 2/3 of Crush It, is still relevant and probably always will be. It's about doing what you're passionate about. And I know there's a lot of people out there just roll their eyes. Okay, put your eyes back, especially if you're driving.
Right.
I understand it. I get, and I get also what I consider to be excellent advice. Go be passionate about what you're doing. And this is some advice not only from others, but from Grant Cardone himself. He became passionate about being a car salesman, and it's not bad advice. If I was going to condense this all down, I would say do something you're passionate about, whether it's you're passionate already or you become passionate about it. Do it. I watched Frank do this. He flipped the bit. He went data. The last couple of years, we started talking about it because he knew I was deep into the data engineering part about 2 years ago this month. And everything that has happened in the last 2 years has been Frank executing on that. And he became very impassioned about it. And we've done all this, but we've had people like Donald Farmer. We've had Lynn Langan. We've had
Rima.
Dr. Rima Nema. Yes.
He's off the charts smart.
I know. I was just shocked when some of these people said yes. That's why I'm optimistic about, about Taleb.
Right.
It's just so, yeah, great guests. All people who are well known, people who are just getting started, people who are have been doing things like analytics, things like analysis services and stuff like that for better than a decade, and people who just jumped into this 18 months before and are excited and new about it. And we talked with who was the lady that did the brain waves, the brain scans? Who was
that was Amanda Lang.
Amanda Lang. That was a great show.
Yeah. So the backstory on that was she had joined Microsoft just the evangelism team, just as I was leaving the evangelism team to go do the House of Cards thing on Cave Street. And I just remember her we were talking about because I think she just joined at the time, and she's like, somehow the topic of left brain, right brain perception kind of came up, and then she kind of turned to me and said, "Oh, but that's totally bogus, though." And I'm like, "Really?" It's like, yeah, well, when I would wire up people's brains for she said it in a way that you could easily take as very ominous, like very Dr. Frank. She's not that way. It was just kind of constantly saying, "Oh yeah, I used to wire up people's brains all the time, and this wouldn't happen." I was just like, "What?" But it was good because when I follow her on Instagram and on Facebook and Twitter, and she was she had said something that she was getting into data now, and I was like, that would be an interesting person to talk to, because she was a game developer, kind of a games journalist too.
Yeah.
But part of what drove her to data, and you can go back and listen to the show because it's a really good one.
Yeah.
Was she would basically want to make better games, and one of the ways you do that is you basically monitor people's brainwaves and their attention and things like that, and how to make scary games scarier, basically. And she crunched the data, so she kind of fell into data in a way that she had not anticipated, because she just wanted to make games. Which is an interesting thing, how data. Yeah, that's why our question we added. Did the data life find you, or did the data did you find a data life?
Yeah.
You know?
It's a fantastic question. And that's one of the things we do. You know, Frank was talking about the format of the show a little earlier. We have a set list of questions that we send everybody. We say, if you want to be on Data Driven, here's where we start. And that's one of them. You know, did you find data? Did data find you? And then we tell everyone that we're just going to kind of base on your answers. We're going to ask other questions in between. And we may take off, you know, down one of your answers and learn more from that. But,
Right.
you know, it's been, gosh, Frank, a year. It doesn't seem like it's been a year. It's just been so much fun.
It has. It's actually been more than a year because we recorded the show with Jen in late February.
That's right.
So it's just kind of like, I thought about making a data point about that, and I was like, nah, no one will really get that because it was just basically you and me at that point.
That's true.
And Jen. So big props to Jen, Lynn, and Nick, who were our first 3 guests, who we didn't have anything to show. Like, we couldn't be like, well, what's a sample episode look like?
That's
or sound
true.
like?
Yeah.
Wow. Especially Jen, because if you listen to it now, maybe we hear it, but we were so green at the time. It was like, oh my God.
Yes. Total noob here. But yeah, she hung in there with us. And, you know, JenUnderwood.com, that's a big site. If you're into analytics, you know that already. And she covers the whole spectrum. I mean, she is not vendor specific, and she's hardworking, and she's really, really smart. And on top of that, I know her personally. She's a nice lady. She really is. And so, yeah, a lot of people, I can't think of anybody who's not a nice person that we've interviewed. Everybody seems to be really engaged, and everybody seems motivated by trying to, you know, make the world a better place, help us understand our world a little better. So I can't believe it's been a year, but this has been great, Frank. Thank you for suggesting this. You started it. You just called me. So thank you. Thanks for calling me, man.
No problem. No problem, man. And I think, you know, we are very data driven here, you know, in terms of, you know, the data points was just something I recorded. I was at a Relay for Life in Latrobe, Pennsylvania.
I remember that. Yeah.
And we had just set up the Facebook page, and Facebook Live had just kind of started. And I'm like, and it was Relay for Life as an American Cancer Society event where they talk about, you know, cancer research and supporting it and stuff like that. And there was actually somebody there talking about kind of like, well, we're doing the data analysis now, and my ears perked up, like, because our second show, I think she was our second show, second or third, was Lynn Langett. Yeah. And go back and listen to that show, because that was pretty awesome. Not only is Lynn awesome, but like the work she's doing.
Yeah.
Whoa. So I recorded something. I was like, you know, kind of like, you know, my mother-in-law died, like, you know, before I met my wife, so I never met her, and it was because of cancer. And like, you know, now being into data, I feel like I can actually help against that. And I was just kind of like, you know, from the heart, off the hip. Most of these data points are not scripted at all. We have
nope, not at all.
I don't think any of them are scripted, which is good. I mean, but we edited them down. So if you want to see the fun stuff, go watch the real Facebook Live. So then I showed it to Andy, and Andy's like, oh my, you know, you need to put this on the podcast. And I was like, well, I need to figure out how to do that. And that, but I mean, that what's interesting is how that format has really taken off. And I like something you said, Andy, when you were at RDU, the airport.
Yep.
Where you were like, you know, we can't be in the studio. We bring the studio to you. We're like, you know, we bring the studio with us.
I think you said that to me first, Frank.
No. I don't remember anymore.
I'm not that creative. I'm just telling.
But no, I think it's really cool because, you know, rather than have like a lull of shows, we are doing interesting stuff. We're blessed in the sense that we are working along incongruence with our passions.
Absolutely, yes.
And it's fun to get to share that. And I actually have a data point. So how they kind of stew the data points, they kind of come about, how they brew, if you will, is like, you know, we'll have an idea, and then sometimes I'll be like, I'll text Andy like, is that a good idea? And you're like, yeah. Almost never have you said, well, I don't know about that.
I don't think you've ever had a bad idea, though. At least not one you shared with me.
Oh yeah, a lot of things don't make it out of the neural network, but no. So you know, kind of like we have this idea and we want to, you know, expand upon it, or just ask questions, because I mean, a lot of this stuff, particularly along the lines of ethics and stuff, are just no one really knows. There's no
Right.
real good answer.
Yeah.
And I think even though there's no real good answer, it's still worth talking about it.
Absolutely.
You know, like the nature of consciousness, right? Well, what's going to happen when we build a machine that either develops its own consciousness or can capture someone's consciousness and make them live on?
Right.
You know, but then you get into this whole thing of, well, what is consciousness?
Right.
And you know, people have been trying. I mean, organized religions arguably started kind of around figuring out what is the meaning of life and the nature of consciousness.
Sure.
And there's some what's really intriguing is there are some thought that now maybe consciousness is an emergent phenomena, meaning that it just kind of happens. So it's a very intriguing issue, but it's one that no one's really figured out. And you know, what happens now when you have actual data to apply to kind of brainwave activity and such, and how does that work?
Oh, definitely.
So.
Yeah. It's definitely going to be, you know, what is it? We're blessed and cursed to live in interesting times.
Right.
Something
right.
like that. Yeah. We're there. We're definitely
So I know
there.
you have to travel because you're headed to Sequel Saturday, New York.
Yeah, which by the time we air this show will have been like last week, but that's okay. I'm headed that way. Yep, I'm going up and doing a day-long pre-con. And actually, about the time this show airs, I will be getting ready to go back to New York to do some work up there for a week, deliver some training.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
That's awesome. So we can't say go check out your talk, but hopefully by the time you're hearing this, you will have recorded some data points, because that's the other thing we do too. We go to these events and we see somebody that we think would be interesting.
Yep.
And like, you know, you've done that with Buck Woody.
Yeah, and
you've
you
done that
did
with
it.
Grant.
Yeah, you did it last week or a couple of weeks ago now at Philly Data, Azure Data
Right.
Fest. Yeah.
Right.
Awesome.
Karen Lopez on the show. Trying to get her on a full show, because the stuff she's doing is pretty unique, and then two, pretty cool.
Mm-hmm.
Fun fact, you bumped into Grant Fritchie, and through you, I reconnected with Grant Fritchie because he and I used to work at on Wall Street together.
Oh, wow.
In tech support.
Oh, wow.
Which was pretty funny. I was like, hey, I know that name, because it's not like Bob Jones or whatever.
Right. That's funny.
So yeah, he's a trip. He was that way when I knew him.
Yeah. I imagine
he's a cool guy.
He is. We should get him on the show as well, so we can talk about your old times.
Oh yeah, that'd be fun. Because we both work the help desk, which, you know, that gives you an insight into the human condition that kind of sours you on humanity. But that's another story. So I know you have to drive up north, and as someone who has made that drive first from DC, I know how unpleasant it can be.
Well, I'm flying. So I'm like 3.5 hours.
Okay.
I'm going to drive even further south and fly out of Raleigh. But,
okay.
Yeah, it's a direct flight, but I do need to get going. So
right. So I'll let you go, and I would say I will ask you this question, and then we'll let the nice British lady finish it. What has I'll give you my answer. What has surprised you about kind of how the show has things have kind of emerged? Because a show develops personality over time.
Sure.
And I would say for me, it was the movie references in almost every show. That for me kind of was surprising. So what for you surprised you about kind of every show?
You know, gosh, the movie references is a really good one. But for me, I like the personal touch. I can't think of I can think of a bunch of examples, but the one that comes to mind first is from one of our early shows with Rema Nema, where she talked about being a new immigrant to the U.S. and selling magazines door to door. So we watched her on stage at the Build event last week, delivering, you know, internationally to a worldwide audience, talking about the updates to Azure Cosmos DB, and she's I consider her the face of Cosmos DB. She's done a lot of work in that. Super smart. And to hear her talk about selling magazines door to door, Uh, that was it was amazing to get that insight. So I was very,
Right.
very moved by that. And we've had stories emerge from almost every podcast like that.
That's true. That's true. So I'm excited. One would say I'm super excited about how the data-driven adventure will continue. One of the things that gives me that early on gave me good joy was one of the statistics I heard is that podcasts that 90% of the podcasts that get created don't go beyond their third episode.
Right.
So when we hit 3, we were like, yay. And when we hit 10, we were like, whoa. And then when we hit 100, and I recorded a special thing. So,
That's
you
it.
know, I don't want to jinx it, but, I think we're going to keep doing this.
I think so too.
All right. And with that, you have a great day, and we'll let the British lady end the show.
Thanks for listening to Data Driven. Don't just listen. Become a data driver by going to datadriven.tv to sign up to join the community, access to special events, tips and tricks, and more. Sign up today at datadriven.tv.